Brussels spent last week threatening Orbán. Budapest spent last week building an army, while 27 EU leaders sat in an emergency summit demanding Orbán comply. Orbán was already 3 steps ahead. On March 21st, he opened the doors of Budapest to the most powerful gathering of anti-establishment leaders the Western world has ever seen in one room. 51 countries, 667 foreign guests, 45 speakers. One message aimed directly at Brussels. The age of patriots is here. Donald Trump sent a video message. Javier Milei flew in from Argentina. Alice Weidel stood at the podium and called Hungary a beacon of hope in Europe. And Viktor Orbán stood in front of all of them and said something that Brussels absolutely cannot answer. In another year or two, the entire Western world will be covered in patriotic colors. This is not a political conference. This is the birth of a global coalition, and the EU has no idea how to stop it. Because this time, Orbán is not alone. He was never really alone. But now the whole world can see exactly who is standing with him. Let's go through what really happened in Budapest on March 21st. Because the mainstream media gave you fragments, a quote here, a headline there, but never the full picture. And the full picture is the most significant thing that has happened in European politics in years. It starts with what Brussels tried to do before the conference even began. Independent media outlets were not allowed inside CPAC Hungary 2026. The EU-aligned press had to stand outside while history was being made inside. Think about what that tells you. Orbán knew exactly what would happen if the establishment media got inside. They would cut the speeches into fragments, strip the context, and turn every powerful moment into a scandal. So he closed the doors, and the speeches happened anyway. And the world watched through the cameras of the people inside. That is not censorship. That is strategy. And it worked perfectly. Now let's talk about who walked through those doors. Because the guest list is the story. And the story is one that no EU diplomat wants to read. From the United States, Donald Trump, not in person. A video message played to the entire hall just before Orbán's keynote. And in that message, Trump said something that has never been said by a sitting US president about a European leader in the modern era. I am endorsing his election, which is coming up pretty soon. He has my complete and total endorsement. Complete and total. Those are not diplomatic words. Those are the same words Trump used for himself. The same words he used when he wanted to signal that this is not a courtesy, this is a commitment. And Trump added the reason. Because Orbán has shown the entire world what is possible when you defend your borders, your heritage, your sovereignty, and your values. From Argentina, Javier Milei. The man who cut inflation and poverty in one of the most dramatic economic turnarounds of the last decade. He did not send a video, he flew to Budapest. And he stood at the podium and delivered the speech that every EU bureaucrat needed to hear. Whatever Hungary decides will resonate throughout Europe. When a leader like Viktor Orbán takes up that fight without asking permission, he becomes a beacon for all of us who refuse to accept that the West's destiny is one of managed decline. Managed decline. That is the phrase. And it cuts right to the center of what Brussels has been doing for 20 years. Not growing, not building. Managing the decline of a civilization and calling it progress. And then Alice Weidel, the co-leader of the Alternative for Germany, the party that just became the largest opposition force in the German Bundestag. The woman who was supposed to be marginalized, isolated, destroyed by the German establishment. Standing on the stage in Budapest with a smile, she thanked Orbán for hosting CPAC. She called Hungary a beacon of hope in Europe. She said Europe is at a crossroads of destiny. And then she turned her attention directly to Brussels and said the words that every German taxpayer needed to hear. They pile up debt upon debt upon debt, and ship countless billions to one of the most corrupt regimes on earth. To prolong a war that is not ours, it's not ours. And she closed with 3 words. God bless Hungary. God bless Hungary. From the leader of Germany's largest opposition party, standing on a stage in Budapest, 3 weeks before the Hungarian election. If that is not a political earthquake, nothing is. But here is the detail that makes this even more powerful. And it is the detail that every mainstream outlet missed completely. It was not just Trump, Milei, and Weidel. Look at the full list and understand what Orbán actually built in that arena. Geert Wilders, the Dutch Prime Minister, was there. The man who is currently governing the Netherlands and shifting its policy away from Brussels. Herbert Kickl of Austria's Freedom Party, the most powerful political figure in Vienna right now. Santiago Abascal of Spain's Vox. André Ventura of Portugal's Chega. Tom van Grieken of Belgium's Vlaams Belang. Mateusz Morawiecki, the former Polish Prime Minister who spent years fighting Brussels from Warsaw. And from Italy, Matteo Salvini by video message. That is not a fringe gathering. That is a roll call of the most significant political forces reshaping European democracy right now. Every country represented. Every major right-wing movement that is either governing or on the verge of governing, in that room. In Budapest. At Orbán's invitation. And what did Orbán say to all of them? He said the European Union is the epicenter of the problem, that European democracy is dying, not because of Orbán's Hungary, but because of EU interference in the internal affairs of member states. He said that the ground is shaking in Germany. He acknowledged Alice Weidel directly from the stage. calling out that conservative politicians in Germany face constant harassment from intelligence services and censorship. He said 3.5 of the Visegrad Four are already in the Patriot camp. Slovakia under Fico, Hungary under Orbán, Czech Republic under Babiš, and Poland. Half, because while Donald Tusk leads the government, a conservative president in Karol Nawrocki is in the presidential palace. And then he said the sentence that Brussels has no answer for: we are fighting for the soul of the Western world. Not for Hungary, not for Eastern Europe, for the soul of the Western world. And this struggle is being fought at universities, in churches, and in the streets of every major European city. Now let's talk about what Brussels actually did while this was happening, because the contrast is extraordinary. The same week that 51 countries gathered in Budapest to declare solidarity with Orbán, the EU Council was quietly preparing new legal options to strip Hungary of its voting rights. The same week that Trump sent his complete and total endorsement, EU officials were leaking that they might have to wait for Hungary's election and hope Orbán loses. The same week that Milei flew from Buenos Aires to stand next to Orbán on stage, Brussels was briefing journalists that their plan B for Ukraine funding was ready if Orbán continued to block. The contrast could not be sharper. On one side, a global coalition of leaders, presidents, prime ministers, and millions of voters gathered in Budapest with flags and speeches and a declaration that this movement is only getting stronger. On the other side, leaks, legal threats, hopes that one election might solve the problem. Orbán did not just build an alliance this week. He built a visual argument. The argument that the future is in Budapest, not in Brussels. And no EU press release can compete with a hall full of world leaders delivering that message from a stage. And now here is the number that matters, because there is always a number. And this one is the most important number nobody is talking about. 667 foreign guests from 51 countries attended CPAC Hungary 2026. That is more than double the number who attended 5 years ago. The movement is growing. It is not shrinking. It is not being isolated. Every freeze, every threat, every Article 7 procedure, every frozen billion. None of it has stopped this. None of it has shrunk the coalition. Every act of pressure from Brussels has produced one result: more people in Budapest, more flags, more speeches, more endorsements. And the EU keeps applying the same pressure, because they have no other tools. Because their system was not designed to handle a member state that refuses to comply and then builds a global alliance around the refusal. And now the election, April 12th, 3 weeks away. And Orbán is heading into it with the most powerful endorsement package in Hungarian political history. Trump, Milei, Weidel, Kikel, Salvini, Abascal. Every patriot movement in Europe and beyond, publicly, loudly, on record, backing Viktor Orbán. The EU is backing Peter Magyar, quietly, with frozen funds as the carrot and Article 7 as the stick. No video messages, no rallies, no stage. Just pressure from institutions that the Hungarian electorate has watched attack their country for years. The EU chose the wrong weapon. You cannot beat a rally with a lawsuit. You cannot beat an endorsement with a freeze. You cannot beat a global coalition with a legal procedure that has never actually been completed against a single member state in the history of the European Union. Orbán knows this. His entire strategy is built on this knowledge. Every time Brussels escalates, he escalates back. Every time they threaten, he holds a conference. Every time they freeze, he builds an alliance. He has turned every act of EU pressure into a campaign poster. And the campaign posters are working. There is one more detail from CPAC that nobody reported. Eduardo Bolsonaro, son of Brazil's former president, stood at the podium and said something that connects every thread in this story. He said, "This is what is going to happen with Orbán if you lose the election here. It is what they tried to do with President Trump in the US." He connected Budapest directly to the pattern that is now visible across the entire Western world. The same institutions, the same methods, the same targets. And then he said, their last hope is censoring, their last hope. Not their strategy, their last hope. Because persuasion failed, and lawsuits failed, and freezing funds failed. And now the only remaining option is to silence the movement. And they cannot even do that. Because 667 people from 51 countries just flew to Budapest and made sure the whole world was watching. And there is one more layer to this that the mainstream media completely ignored. The day after CPAC, on Monday, March 24th, the Patriots for Europe political group held a grand assembly in Budapest. A separate event. A second wave. As if CPAC alone was not enough, Orbán doubled down with a second gathering of European patriot leaders, making the same declaration in the same city in the same week. 2 conferences. 1 message. Brussels is losing this argument on every front and in every format simultaneously. Viktor Orbán did not just hold a conference this week. He showed Brussels the size of the army standing behind him, and it is bigger than anyone in Brussels was prepared to admit. The EU spent the week drafting legal threats. Orbán spent the week on a stage with a president, a prime minister, and the most powerful opposition leaders in Europe. The army is assembled. The election is 3 weeks away. And whatever happens on April 12th, this coalition does not disappear. These alliances do not dissolve. These endorsements are not taken back. Brussels built a wall to stop one man. And one man built a movement that spans 51 countries. That is the story. And only one channel is showing you the full picture. Subscribe. Hit the like button. Because April 12th is coming. And the night of that election, you will see the result here first.